Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Ches Amud Aleph 8a of Maseches Kiddushin, and we're about a third down the page. The beginning of the line is Amar Rav Yosef. The Gemara is discussing the opinion of Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef on the previous Amud, the previous page, had said that if in a situation where a man is mekadesh a woman, he betroths a woman with a piece of silk or something, so the opinion of the Rabbanan was that there's no need to evaluate the silk, and the opinion of Rav Yosef was that you need to evaluate to see how much the silk is worth. And the Gemara came out in one version, one understanding of Rav Yosef, that would be true even if he didn't specify anything about the silk and it's clearly worth more than a pruta, so it clearly is worth enough. But still, Rav Yosef held, just like when you're mekadesh with money, she knows exactly how much she's getting. So too when you're mekadesh, not with kesef, with money itself, but with shava kesef, with something that has the value of money, in this case silk, in our situation a ring, Rav Yosef holds that in one understanding of Rav Yosef's opinion, that it's necessary for her to know exactly what it's worth, and so it has to be evaluated before he gives it to her for a Kiddushin. So the Gemara suggested a source for Rav Yosef where he learned it from a brisa last week, and now the Gemara is going to bring another source. It says, Amar Rav Yosef said, Mina la, from where do I know that she has to know the value of it? D'Tanya, we learning a brisa. The brisa is dealing with the halacha of pidyon haben. Pidyon haben is that a father who has a bechor, a firstborn son, has to redeem that firstborn son by giving money to a kohen. So there's exceptions where this doesn't apply, but in general, that is the halacha. If a boy is born first into a family, so the brisa says, Egel zeh lepidyon bini. If a man goes to a kohen and says, this egel, this calf, should be for the redemption of my son, but he doesn't specify how much the calf is worth, or he says, talis zeh lepidyon bini. This talis, this garment should be for the redemption of my son. Lo amar kum, he hasn't said anything, that doesn't work. But if he says, Egel zeh b'chamesh sla'im lepidyon bini, if he says this egel, this calf, which is worth 5 selah, which is the amount that is necessary for a pidyon haben, to redeem a firstborn, or he says, talis zu b'chamesh sla'im lepidyon bini, that this talis, which is worth 5 sla'im, 5 selah, should be used for the pidyon haben, bino padoi. Then it works. The boy is redeemed, the son is redeemed. So the Gemara wants to understand what is the situation here, where if you just give it without specifying the amount, it doesn't work, but if you specify the amount, it does work. So Rav Yosef is elaborating. He says, Hai pidyon, heichi dami. This brisa that talks about this redemption, what is the case? What is it dealing with? Ilema de lo shavi. If, let's say you understand that it's not even worth 5 selah. It's cheaper than that. So then the Gemara says, Kol kamina, is that within his power to do that? Is he able to give something that's less than 5 selah and say, oh, but let's pretend that it's worth 5 selah? The Gemara says, no, it's not within his power, Rav Yosef says. So that can't be what it's talking about. Elo lav afal gav deshavi. So it must be that it is worth 5 selah. And yet, we see that when he doesn't specify what it's worth, the pidyon haben doesn't work. Only when he specifies that it's worth 5 sla'im does it work. So he says, you see, v'kivan de lo kaitzi lo. Since he didn't it wasn't an exact amount, we didn't know the exact value, it doesn't work. So you see that by pidyon haben, also, you see this concept that, according to Rav Yosef's understanding, that in order for the transaction to work, in order to use shava kesef, in order to use something that's just the value of money, but not money itself, you have to know exactly what it's worth. So too, when it comes to Kiddushin, Rav Yosef says that the betrothal, the wife, the woman also has to know exactly what the item that she's being betrothed with is worth. So the Gemara says, no. You don't have a proof from there. Le'olam de lo shavi. Really, we could say the case is that the item is not worth that much. It's not worth 5 sla'im. whether it's the the talis or the egel, the calf, it's not worth 5 slayim. Ukigon de kabel kohen ilave. But the case is where the Kohen accepted it as if it was worth 5 slayim, where it had value to the Kohen. To other people it wouldn't have such value, but the Kohen considered this something very valuable. Ki hadar of Kahana. Like we find by Rav Kahana a similar idea. Shakel sudra mibei pidyon haben. He took a handkerchief from the house of Pidyon Haben, meaning he accepted. Rav Kahana seemingly was a Kohen. I think that relates to his name, Rav Kahana. And he accepted a sudar, a handkerchief, a piece of silk, for a Pidyon Haben. And even though it seemingly did not have a market value of 5 selah, so it wasn't enough to redeem the firstborn with, but he said to the guy, L'didi chazi li 5 slayim. For me, it's worth 5 slayim. And the reason why was because Rav Kahana was a rabbi, he was an important, a prominent person, and for him, it was, so the Gemara actually is going to explain this. Why was it worth 5 slayim? It says, Amar Rav Ashi says, Lo Amar an Ela Kigon Rav Kahana. We only say this idea for someone like Rav Kahana, de Gabra Rabbahu, because he was a great man, he was prominent. He needed a handkerchief for his head, he needed a head covering, he needed a yarmulke. But other people not. So it seems the custom in those days was that not everyone covered their head, but somebody who was a Gavra Rabbah, someone like Rav Kahana, one of the rabbis, certainly would not go with his head uncovered, and therefore it was very important for him to have a yarmulke. And so for him, I don't know why he didn't have one, but maybe he lost his, but at that moment it was something that was very valuable to him, and therefore he accepted it as if it was 5 slayim, because he would have paid 5 slayim for it at that moment, because it was very important to him. Kiha Demar bar Rav Ashi. Like we find a similar thing with Mar bar Rav Ashi, Mar the son of Rav Ashi. Zavan sudra me'ime de Rabba mekubi. He bought a sudar, a handkerchief, from the mother of Rabbah from the city of Kubi. Shavi asara bitleisar, even though it was only worth 10 really, and its market value was 10, but he was willing to pay tleisar, 13, whatever the currency was there, zuz, I guess. But we see this idea that someone is able to, sometimes something can have particular value to a certain person, given their needs, given their status, and therefore that person accepts it as if they had paid more for it, because they'd be willing to pay more for it, or they will pay more for it in the second case. So Rav Kahana accepted the sudar as if it was 5 slayim for the Pidyon Haben, because it was very valuable to him. And that is how the other opinion that's coming to argue on Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef wanted to bring a proof from the fact that the Brisa says that, remember the Brisa said that if you do Pidyon Haben with a calf or a talis, so if you don't specify what it's worth, then it doesn't work. But if you specify that it's 5 slayim, then it works. So Rav Yosef said, look, you have a proof that you got to specify how much something is worth when you're using an item as part of a transaction instead of the money itself. And the Rabbanan who disagree with Rav Yosef about that, they would say, no, this was a unique case. This case was that it wasn't actually worth 5 slayim. So if he didn't tell the value, then it wouldn't have been a Pidyon Haben. It wouldn't have worked. It wasn't really of that value. Only because he specified, I want you to accept this as if it's 5 slayim. That's why it worked in that case. That's what the Brisa was talking about, a situation where the Kohen would accept it as if it was worth more. Gemara continues after the two dots. It says, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar said, Hiskadshi li b'mana. If a man says to a woman, be mekudeshes to me, be betrothed to me for a maneh is 100 dinar. V'nasan la dinar, and then he gave her 1 dinar. Harezu mekudeshes. She is mekudeshes, betrothed from that moment. V'yashlim, but he still has to pay the rest. My taima, why does it work already? He didn't give her what he said he was going to give her yet. We're saying he has to, but he hasn't yet. Why does it work already? Why is she already mikudeshes from this moment? Kivan de amar la maneh, since he told her, I'm going to pay you 100 amaneh, 100 dinar, v'yav la dinar, and he already paid her 1 dinar, kiman de amar la almanas dami. We look at it like he's telling her almanas. He's making a condition that you are betrothed to me on condition that I pay you 100. Ve'amar Rav Huna amar Rav, and Rav Huna, in the name of Rav, said, Kala omer almanas, ke omer me'achshav dami. Whoever says a language of almanas, on condition, it's as if they say from now. Meaning, when you make a condition, when and the condition is eventually fulfilled, so from when does the result of that condition kick in? Does it only kick in once the condition is actually fulfilled? Or does it kick in from now once the condition is fulfilled later? So Rav Huna saying in the name of Rav that when you say almanas, I'm going to be betrothed to you on condition that I give you 100 dinar. So the amaneh, the Kiddushin occurs now, on condition that eventually he give her the 100 dinar. And that's the case over here, that Rabbi Elazar is saying that when he says, I'm going to give you 100, and he gives her 1 now, it's like he says, almanas, although it seems that in this case he didn't actually say the words almanas on condition, but we look at it that way because he said, I'm going to give you 100, and he started giving her some of it, he gave her 1, and we say that that's looked at as like he's making condition, but he wants it to kick in now. I'm starting to give you now, on condition I'm going to give you the whole thing, but the Kiddushin should take place right now. Says the Gemara Meisvei, we have a question on this from a Brisa, a contradiction. The Brisa says, Iskachi li b'maneh. A man says to a woman, you should be mikudeshes, betrothed to me for a maneh, for this amount, for 100 dinar. V'haya moneh v'holich. And he's counting them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, he's counting them out. V'ratza echad mehen lachzar. And then one of them changes their mind. Either the man or the woman, in the middle of the process, changes their mind. Says the Brisa, afilu b'dinar ha'acharon harashus biyado. Even up to the last dinar, the last of the 100, he has the right to do that, or she has the right to do that. Either of them could back out before the last dinar has been paid. So that is a contradiction, because according to what Rabbi Elazar said, as soon as he gave the first dinar, the Kiddushin was done. At that point, neither of them has the right to back out. As long as, I guess he could arrange to not fulfill the condition, and then retroactively maybe it wouldn't work, but here it actually implies that either of them have the right to back out, and it sounds like the Kiddushin has not yet been fulfilled, has not yet been met. So that's a contradiction. Here it sounds like it's not until he actually pays the 100 that the Kiddushin is fulfilled, which contradicts Rabbi Elazar, who said that they're mikudeshes already now, and then he has to pay the rest. The Gemara explains now, and here what are we dealing with in the case of the Brisa? Why is the Kiddushin only fulfilled at the end? We're dealing with da'amar b'maneh zu. He said with this maneh. And when he specifies with this maneh, he means the whole thing. Not with the first dinar that I pay out of the maneh. The maneh is 100 dinar. If he says I'm going to be mikudeshes you with this dinar, he specifies it. And Rashi says, Daita akula, her mind is on the whole thing. She's not planning to be mikudeshes until she gets the whole thing. When he says this maneh. That's why in the Brisa, there is no Kiddushin until he pays the whole thing. Because he said, maneh zu, this maneh. So she's expecting the whole thing before Kiddushin takes effect. As opposed to in our case, in Rabbi Elazar's case, he didn't say maneh zu, he just said b'maneh for 100. And then he gave her the first one, already then it kicks in. She's willing to accept Kiddushin, we say, already, or become a mikudeshes, become betrothed, right away, even though she hasn't yet received everything, on condition that she'll receive the rest at some point. Asks the Gemara, how could you say that the Brisa is talking about where the man said maneh zu, and he specified this maneh? The Seifa, the next part of the Brisa, talks about explicitly that the case is where he said maneh zu. And if the second part of the brisa, which we didn't read yet, we're about to read it, but if the second part of the brisa is where he explicitly said manazu, and the brisa specifies that, so then how can you say that the implication is that the first case was not a case where he said manazu? Reisha b'manastam. It sounds like the beginning, the first clause, the first case is manastam, where he didn't explicitly say this mana, he just said a mana. Dikatani seifa, because we learn in the seifa, in the second part of the brisa, Amar lo hiskadshi li b'manazu. If he says to her, be mikudeshes to me for this mana, and he specifies, in the seifa he specified it, it's explicit there. V'nimtza mana chaser dinar. And then he paid her he had the whole mana, the 100 dinar out, and he started paying her the 100 dinar, but it turned out that it was only 99. It was chaser dinar. There was one missing. Oh, dinar shel nechoshes. Or one of them was not silver, it was copper. And copper apparently was not a usable currency. In any event, it's not what he told her. He told her he was giving her silver. Eina mikudeshes. The Kiddushin doesn't work. She didn't get what she was expecting. But dinar ra, but if you just have a dinar, which is ra, which is bad, in other words, it's silver, but it's rubbed out or something, the coin is rubbed out, so then harezu mikudeshes, the Kiddushin works because he actually gave her, it is a value. B'yachlev, he has to switch that one in because he has to give her proper currency, but that works. But the point is that how could we say that the Reisha, the first clause, is talking about where he said manazu, this specific mana, and he specified it, if the Seifa, the second clause, specifically says that that's what it's talking about? The implication is the first case was where he didn't say manazu, he just said mana stam, he just said for a mana in general. So the Gemara says, look, no, it's not a problem. Reisha v'Seifa de amar b'manazu. Both the Reisha, the first clause, and the second clause are talking about where he said manazu, he specified this mana, that's what I'm going to betroth you with. Upeirushe kamefarish. And the second clause is elaborating, is explaining the first case. That the first case we said that if they're counting it, and a ratza echad mehang lachzar, and if one of them wants to take it back, wants to back out, afilu b'dinar ha'acharon harashus biyado, even on the last dinar, the person is allowed to. And then it says, Ketzad, what's the case? Kigon da'amar la b'manazu. The case is where he said, manazu. In other words, this isn't explicit in the brisa, but we're trying to explain that the brisa means we didn't identify the case as manazu, as this specific mana, until the second clause in the brisa. But we're learning that was really also informing us about the first case of the brisa, that was also manazu. That's the case where we're talking about. But if you don't say manazu, if you just say for a mana, that would be the case of Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Eliezer said that if you just say mana stam, you just say I'm being mekadesh you for a mana, then as soon as you give the first dinar, the first of the 100 dinar, already then the Kiddushin kicks in. It's like on condition I'm going to give you the rest, and the Kiddushin kicks in. Says the Gemara, v'hachinami mistabra. And really it makes sense that both of them are talking about, both the Reisha and the Seifa, the first half and the second half of the Brisa, are both talking about manazu. De'isaka daitach Reisha b'manastam, because if you will want to tell me that, if you think that you can learn that the Reisha, that the first clause is talking about manastam, where he didn't specify, he just said a mana, he didn't say this mana, hashta b'manastam lo abi kiddushi b'manazu mibai. If manastam is not Kiddushin, so would we even think to consider that manazu would be Kiddushin? In other words, if it's true that when you don't even specify this specific mana, you just say in general that I'm being mekadesh you for a mana, but you don't say this mana, and then you start counting, and at some point somebody wants to back out. So if in that case you're allowed to back out, and the Kiddushin doesn't kick in already from the first dinar, like Rabbi Eliezer is suggesting, if that's not true, so then by mana zu, where you do specify this mana, so of course that would be true. Because there you said this mana, and then she didn't get that mana yet. So if the ratio was talking about mana stam, and telling you that the Kiddushin does not kick in right away, so then the Seifa would be obvious. Mana zu, obviously the Kiddushin wouldn't kick in right away, and I guess obviously if there was anything wrong with it, meaning you didn't have all the money there, so obviously it wouldn't be Kiddushin because she never got the money. So we're saying that it makes sense, or it wouldn't really make sense to distinguish and say the first case was mana stam, and the second case was mana zu. The first case was just in general a mana, and the second case was this specific mana, because I could figure that once I knew that mana stam, without specifying this mana, the Kiddushin doesn't kick in right away until everything's been paid, then obviously that would be true if you specified the specific mana. Until you get that mana, the Kiddushin wouldn't kick in. And so you wouldn't need two clauses. But now that they're both talking about mana zu, this specific one, so now we have, I guess, two different ideas. We have that when you specify the specific one, really, I guess we would be saying, really, like Rebbe Lazar is true, that if you say mana stam, this is not in the Brisa, but if you say mana stam, a mana in general, then the Kiddushin does kick in right away with the first dinar. But if you say mana zu, you say this specific mana, so then while they're counting up, someone has the right to retract, and also if anything turns out to be a little bit off, you also have the right to retract. The Gemara says, Imishumha lo irya. If that's your only proof, if that's your big proof that they must be both about mana zu, that doesn't concern us, because Tana Seifa Liguye Reisha. Because even if you can figure out if the Reisha, if the first part I've been talking about mana stam, and the second part is talking about mana zu, and you're right, once I know the Reisha, once I know the first case, I can figure out the second case. But I still need them both. Why? Because the Seifa informs me about the Reisha. The second part informs me about the first part. Shalotoma Reisha b'mana zu. So that you don't say that the Reisha, the first part, was talking about mana zu, this specific mana. Aval b'mana stam havu kiddushin. But you might say, again, we're like playing devil's advocate here, but you might say that mana stam, without specifying, is kiddushin, like Rebbe Lazar. Meaning, if we're playing devil's advocate against Rebbe Lazar and saying that even by mana stam, without identifying this mana, the Kiddushin doesn't kick in right away, not like Rebbe Lazar said, doesn't kick in with the first dinar, so then I absolutely need two clauses in the Brisa, and two different cases. I need the case of mana stam, and I need the case of mana zu. Because even though by teaching mana stam, that it's not Kiddushin, I could then figure out mana zu, but if I only had one case, I wouldn't have assumed that it's mana stam. I would have assumed it's mana zu. If the Brisa only taught me one case and said, now it could have been specific, which would have solved the issue, it could have told us exactly what it was talking about, but insofar as the Brisa is vague and doesn't tell us in the Reisha what kind of mana situation it's talking about, was it mana stam, where you didn't specify which mana, or was it mana zu, where you specified this mana, so insofar as it's vague, so which one, if I only had one clause in the Brisa, what would I say it's talking about? So I would say it's talking about mana zu. Right? Less of a chiddush, it's less novel, that when you say mana zu, when you say this specific mana, the Kiddushin doesn't work until the whole mana has been paid out. And what would I think about mana stam? Then I think like Rebbe Lazar. I think that it works on the first dinar. So here where we're trying to play devil's advocate against Rebbe Lazar and say we want to suggest that maybe it doesn't work, so then I understand why I need two clauses in the Brisa. Because I need the second clause, even though I could have figured it out from the first clause, but only if I knew what the first clause was talking about. But if I only had one clause, I would assume the first clause is talking about mana zu, this specific mana. That's why I need two clauses. I need the second one to tell me that it's mana zu, so I can learn that the first one is mana stam, and not mana zu. And then I would know that mana stam, where you don't specify, also, even there, the Kiddushin does not kick in on the first dinar. It doesn't kick in until later. So that what the Gemara is really just doing is saying it's not so obvious from the Brisa. We could explain why the Brisa has two clauses, but at the end of the day, Rebbe Lazar has a way to read the Brisa. The Brisa is not a question on him. He has a way to understand the Brisa. And again, his way of understanding it is the distinction so far the Gemara made was Rebbe Lazar was talking about manastam. That's where the Kiddushin kicks in with the first dinar, and then you just have to pay the rest. It's like on condition that you pay the rest. And the Bryce is talking about manazu. When you say manazu, this mana, the Kiddushin doesn't work until it's been completely paid. The Gemara has another answer for the Bryce. Rav Ashi Amar Mone v'holech shani. Rav Ashi says, no, the Bryce is a different type of case, because in the Bryce's case, he's counting it out. That's different. Dedaita kulei. Because her intent is on the whole thing. In the case the Bryce had specifically said that he was counting out the coins to her. In the case where he's counting them out, so then she doesn't intend to accept Kiddushin until she gets it all. But if he didn't have it all here, he just said, I'm going to be Mekadesh you with a maneh. Or he did have it all here, but he wasn't counting out. So he just gave her one for now. So then she says, okay, this is what I'm getting now, and later I'm going to get the rest. But she already accepts Kiddushin when she gets that one. As opposed to in the Brisa, they're Mona v'holech. They're counting as they go. There, the Kiddushin only takes effect once she receives the whole thing. The Gemara now just asks, Haidinar shal nechoshes heichidami. What's this situation of the copper dinar? In the safe of the Brisa, in the second clause, it said that if, as he's counting it out, if one of the dinars turns out to be made of copper, so then the Kiddushin does not take effect. So it says, what's the case? If she knew that one of them was copper, and she still took it, hasavra b'kibla, then she accepted it. And so what's the case? So lo tzricha di'aveni hala b'leilia. The case must be he gave it to her at night. She didn't see that she was getting a copper dinar. And we say there, she didn't know. So she didn't get what she was expecting, so it doesn't work. Inami deshtakachle beini zuzi. Or she found it between the coins. She didn't realize that it was there at first. That would be the case. If she saw it and accepted it as part of the Kiddushin, then the Kiddushin's good. The case has to be where she didn't see it somehow. It was dark. It was in between other coins. And then afterwards she found that it was one of the dinars was copper, not silver. The Kiddushin doesn't work. But if she found out that it was dinar ra, it was just a bad dinar, so then it works. Says the Gemara, dinar ra heichidami. What kind of dinar ra are we talking about? What kind of bad dinar is this? Idelo nafik. If you can't use it, if it's not spendable, it's not accepted anymore, it's too rubbed out. Haynu dinar shanachoshes. That's the same as a copper one. It's not usable, it shouldn't be Kiddushin. So what's the case? In that case we said the Kiddushin does work. So Amar Rav Papa, kigon nafik al yidei hadachak. It can be spent, but it's not easily. I guess not everyone accepts it. You have to convince them to accept it. You have to say, no, look, it's usable. The bank will accept it. Something like that. It's usable, but it's not ideal. So in that situation, if one of the coins was a dinar like that, the Kiddushin works, but he has to replace that coin. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava said, Amar Rava Nachman. Rava said in the name of Rav Nachman, bottom line, Amar la hiskad shili b'maneh. If he said to her, I want to betroth you for a maneh, but he doesn't have the maneh. V'niach la mashkon aleha. Instead he gave her collateral. He gave her his, his bag, whatever you name it. He gave her an item as collateral. His hat. He gave her his hat. Eina mikudeshes. The Kiddushin does not take effect. Why? Top of the next page. Because mana einkan, mashkon einkan. Because there's no money that he gave her, and he didn't give her the mashkon either. Because she doesn't acquire the mashkon. So she never acquired anything. In order for Kiddushin to work, she has to acquire something. So he didn't give her money. He just said, I'm going to give you money. And he didn't give her the mashkon, the collateral, because you don't acquire the collateral in that type of situation. Ace they Rava Rav Nachman. Rava asked a contradiction on Rav Nachman from a Brisa. The Brisa says, Kidsha b'mashkon mikudeshes. if a man betroths a woman with a mashkon, with the collateral, it says that it is mikudeshes, that the Kiddushin does work. So that's a contradiction. We see that you could do Kiddushin with a mashkon, with collateral. So the Gemara answers, no, that's different. Hasam b'mashkon de'acherin. There it's dealing with a case where he had a mashkon, he had a collateral from someone else. Uked Rabbi Yitzchak, like what Rabbi Yitzchak says, the Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, that Rabbi Yitzchak says, Minayin lebal chov shekone mashkon. How do we know that a bal chov, a creditor, acquires the collateral and it's considered his? So that's already identifying Rabbi Yitzchak's opinion. We're quoting, where does that learn from? That's the information we need, really. When a person is a creditor, he lends someone money and the person gives him a mashkon, so that mashkon, that collateral now belongs to him. It's considered like it's his. And so if he turns around and gives that to a woman for Kiddushin, that works, because it was his, if he's giving it to her to keep. As opposed to in our case, where he said he's going to give her Kiddushin, but he didn't yet, and instead he gives her a mashkon to assure her that he's going to give her Kiddushin. Well, she doesn't acquire that mashkon because he's not giving it to her. It's not, and he's not giving it to her to keep. He's just having it sit by her until he gives her the money. The case where it works, where the Brisa says that you could be mekadesh with a collateral, with a mashkon, is where he actually gave her the mashkon to keep. And why is it a mashkon then, if he's just giving her something? What we mean it's a mashkon from someone else. It was the collateral from someone else who owed him money, but that item is considered his. How do we know it's considered his? Now, what we mean, just to clarify, he can't actually give away the collateral, but the collateral, if he lent someone money, the person gave him his hat for the mashko, for the collateral. So that hat belongs to him to the extent that it can be used to extract the loan. So if he gives it to her, he's giving her that collateral. It's now hers to extract the loan. She can't keep the hat, but now she becomes the creditor of the borrower. And that's what he gave her. And there he's actually giving her something. She now possesses the mashkon to be able to collect the loan. Now how do we know that a lender acquires a mashkon? Shenemar, as the verse says, ulecha tia tzedakah, that it will be a tzedakah for you. It's talking about when a situation where someone borrows money and gives a collateral, but the person's very poor, and he doesn't have a blanket to sleep on, and he gave his blanket as collateral, or a situation like that. He needs it back for the night, he needs his pillow back. So the Torah says that you give it back for the night, and it will be considered tzedakah, charity that you gave. So Rabbi Yitzchak said, Im eino kone tzedakah minayin. And if it wasn't yours, what kind of tzedakah is it? It's his. It must be that the Baal Chov, Mikan leBaal Chov shekone mashkon. It must be that the creditor acquires the mashkon, the collateral, in some sense. And that's why when he now returns it to the borrower, it's tzedakah, it's charity, because it's mine and I'm giving it to you now. So you see, a Baal Chov is kone mashkon, and that's the situation where it works for the woman for Kiddushin. If I am a creditor, I have someone's collateral and I give it to a woman for Kiddushin, then that works because I'm now transferring that over to her. Now she's the creditor, but I actually gave her something. As opposed to if I say, I'm going to be mekadesh you with a money and take this collateral in the meanwhile, so then I haven't actually given her anything. It's interesting that that doesn't fall under the status of Baal Chov Kone Mashkon, but it sounds like there's not a real obligation on me to give her just because I say I'm going to be mekadesh her with a money, doesn't all of a sudden create that obligation on its own. So when I give her a mashkon to assure her that I will, there's not an obligation there that now allows her to acquire that collateral. The Gemara just brings a story. It says, B'nei Rav Huna bar Avin zavam ha'yamsa b'priti. The children of Rav Huna bar Avin, they bought a maidservant for priti, for some copper coins. Lo havu ba'adai, they didn't have the money on them though. So osivi nascha aleha. So they gave collateral. They gave a block of silver as collateral. L'sof aikar amsa. In the end, the value of the maidservant went up. And so they wanted to know, did we already acquire her when we gave the collateral? And so when her value went up, she was already in our possession. Or did we not yet acquire her with the collateral, and therefore we now have to pay more? Aslu kamed Rabbi Ami, they came to Rabbi Ami, Amar Lahu, he said to them, Priti enkan, nascha enkan. You didn't pay any prutas, you didn't pay copper coins, and the collateral that you gave is irrelevant. Just like in the case of Kiddushin, they said they're going to buy this maidservant, but they didn't pay yet. But they gave something that assured that they were going to pay. But the seller didn't acquire that collateral. You don't acquire when it's just like, we will pay you, we want to buy something. You don't acquire in that case. That's just like the Kiddushin, where you say, I want to be Mekadesh you. Okay, very nice, but that doesn't make the collateral belong to the person who accepts it. And so therefore, in this case, Rabbi Ami said that you did not acquire the maidservant, and if she went up in value, that means you're just going to have to pay more. Thanks for listening. See you next time.